Hi, welcome back to Othello, Act 4. And we're starting with Scene 2, and then we'll do Scene 3 as well. But this starts out with Othello coming onto the stage with Emilia, who is Iago's wife, the one who stole the handkerchief, and who doesn't know what she's doing in that sense. She doesn't realize how evil her husband is, necessarily. And Othello is so jealous that he's going to check on his wife, Desdemona's lady-in-waiting, the one who serves her, helps her, gets rest, etc. And he says, "You've seen nothing, then?" And Emilia says, "Nor ever heard, nor ever did suspect. Yes, you've seen Cassio and she together. But then I saw no harm, and then I heard each syllable that breath made up between them." What? Did they never whisper? Can you imagine if you were going to have an affair, that what that would consist of is whispering in front of your husband, or in front of people who know your every move from the time you bathe in the morning until you go to bed at night? "Never, my lord. Nor send you out of the way?" "Never. To fetch her hand, her fan, her gloves, her mask, nor nothing?" We'd say, not anything today, but nor nothing. "Never, my lord." That's strange, because he thinks for sure that she must know that his wife is being unfaithful. She doesn't know that she's being unfaithful because Desdemona is not. The only person in this play who is unfaithful is Iago himself. And Emilia says, "I durst, my lord, to wager she's honest," meaning that she is virtuous, that she is faithful. "I would bet on it," she says. "I would lay down my soul at stake. If you think other, remove your thought. It does abuse your bosom. If any wretch have put this in your head, let heaven requite it with a serpent's curse. If anybody has been whispering in your ear," and it's her husband, she has no idea, but she just called him a wretch, and wished the serpent's curse from the biblical story of Adam and Eve and being deceived by the serpent. "For if she be not honest, chaste, and true, there's no man happy. The purest of their wives is foul as slander. She is so above reproach that if somehow one thinks that she's not, nobody is safe." And then Emilia leaves the stage, and Othello says to her, "Bid her come hither, go." And he's talking about, "Tell Desdemona I want to speak with her." She says, "Enough." Yet she's a simple bawd, meaning not very smart, that cannot say as much. And then he starts thinking about Desdemona. This is a subtle whore, a closet lock and key of villainous secrets, and yet she'll kneel and pray. I've seen her do it. All right, so if there's one way to ruin a relationship or a marriage, start calling your spouse a whore. A whore is somebody who makes money by selling their bodies. A whore is somebody who has to earn a living in a very difficult way and kind of a gross way in some ways. Having sex with strangers, whoever is paying the person off. And if anybody ever thought that a marriage could be built on the idea that one's wife is a whore, I beg to differ. I met a man once, well actually, the boyfriend of one of my ex-wife's best friends. And my ex-wife's best friend was a stripper. And she finally brought in a boyfriend into her house. And he says to me, and this is a woman who got her breasts augmented, who would go on cruises to entertain the wealthy men. She came and introduced herself to me by playing with her breasts that she just got augmented in front of my now ex-wife. And I asked her, who is that? She's like, oh, it's my best friend. She was our neighbor, okay? But in order to do what she did, she had to use drugs. And I'll never forget the day when her son, who was 3 years old, came over to our house to play with our youngest son, who was 3 years old. And I asked him, have you had anything to eat? And he said no. And he was dirty. And I asked him which cereal he wanted, and he chose one, and I gave it to him. And as I'm going to get the bowl and the spoon, he sits down on the floor and pours it out on the floor and starts to eat as though he were an animal. All right? This is a word, and I wouldn't even call that neighbor a whore. She was a drug-addicted person who used her body to make a living. And certainly Desdemona is not that way. And so now Desdemona enters with Emilia, and she says, my lord, what is it you will? What would you like me to do? Pray, Chuck, come hither. And Chuck is a term of endearment, right? And Desdemona says, what's your pleasure? Let me see your eyes. Let me look into your eyes. Look in my face. And he's grabbing her probably and making her stare into his face. And she says, what horrible fancy is this? And then he says to Emilia, Othello does, some of your function, mistress. Leave procreance alone and shut the door. So he sends Emilia out. Cough or cry and stand watch. Cough or cry if anybody come. Your mystery. Nay, dispatch. And Emilia's off stage, and he's accusing his beloved wife of being unfaithful to him. And Desdemona says, and she gets down on her knees, upon my knees, what does your speech mean? What does your speech import? I understand a fury in your words, but I do not understand the words. Why? Because she's innocent. And Othello says, why? What art thou? Your wife, my lord, your true and loyal wife. Come swear it, damn yourself, lest being like one of heaven, the devils themselves should fear to seize thee. Therefore be double damned. Swear that thou art honest, meaning swear that you are faithful to me. And Desdemona says, heaven doth truly know it. By God as my witness, I have always been faithful to you, because she loves him. And Othello's reply, heaven truly knows that thou art false as hell. So now, not only is she a whore, she's a devil that is false as hell. Remember in the beginning of the play where Iago would talk about Othello being the devil, when really it's Iago himself. And Desdemona says, to whom, my lord? With whom? How am I false? How have I ever betrayed you? Ah, Desdemona, away, away, away. Now, this is a huge change in his character, because remember when he was being accused of practicing witchcraft to seduce her so that she would marry him and fall in love with him, that he said, go and get your daughter, to his father-in-law. Go and get her and let her speak for himself. And instead, he's telling her, away, I don't want to hear anything about it. Why? Because she's not confirming the bias that he already has. And Desdemona says, alas, the heavy day. And Othello is turned away from her, and he is crying, and she says, why do you weep? Am I the motive of these tears, my lord? If haply you, my father, do suspect an instrument of this your calling back, lay not your blame on me. If you've lost him, why, I've lost him too. I would even give up my own father for you. That's her pledge. That's what she wants to do. She wants to be with Othello. And then Othello says, had it pleased heaven to try me with affliction, had they rained all kinds of sores and shames on my bare head. And why? Because Othello is bald, because he's in his middle age and she's young. And he's talking about the kind of pestilence in the book of Job that Job gets hit with. Steep me in poverty to the very lips, given to captivity me and my utmost hopes. I should have found in some place in my soul a drop of patience. He would have been as patient as Job. But alas, to make me a fixed figure for the time of scorn, to point his slow, unmoving finger at. Yet I could bear that too, well, very well. There where I have garnered up my heart, where either I must live or bear no life. Quiet, dogs. Quiet, puppies. The fountain from which my current runs or else dries up to be discarded thence, or keep it as a cistern for foul toads. Remember he said he'd rather be a toad or a frog in a basement rather than being cuckolded? Once again, Shakespeare comes back to that metaphor. He'd rather be a foul cistern, a place where water seeps in for toads to not engender in. He'd rather be that abyss where toads mate. Turn that complexion here. Look at me. Patience, thou young and rosed-lipped cherubim. So he's looking at her, and she's so gorgeous that he calls her a cherubim. That's a baby angel, the most innocent of all the angels. And he says, after he looks in her face, I there look grim as hell. So once again, going back to this idea that she's some sort of devil. And Desdemona says, I hope my noble lord esteems me honest. I hope you believe that I am faithful to you. And instead he says, oh, I, just like summer flies are in the shambles. You're as faithful to me as flies who perch on dung. They quicken even with blowing. And then he calls her, O thou weed, who are so lovely and fair and smellest so sweet. Can you see him? You smell so sweet and you look so beautiful, right? That the senses ache at thee. He longs for her. Would thou have never been born. Can you imagine being married to someone who tells you, I wish you had never been born. I wish you had never been born. That's about the most cruel thing you could say to a person. I wish you had never been born. And Desdemona says, alas, what sin, what ignorant sin, meaning unknowing sin, have I committed? And he says, was this fair paper, this most goodly book, made to write whore upon it? So he goes back and he calls her a whore again. What committed? What did you do? What did you do? Committed? Oh, thou public commoner. A public commoner is a fancy way of saying you whore. So he calls her a whore again. I should make very forges of my cheeks that would to sinners burn upon modesty, did I but speak thy deeds. My cheeks would turn red if I even talked out loud at the kind of sluttish behavior you have had. What committed? Heaven stops the nose at it. God himself can't smell the stink of her sin, is what Othello is saying here. And the moon winks. The body wind, what kisses all it meets, it hushes. The body wind that kisses all it meets is hushed within the hollow mind of earth and will not hear it. So even the winds that will touch everybody, they're more faithful. than his Desdemona. What committed? You impotent strumpet, which is another way of saying whore. And I am telling you right now, if you were ever in a relationship where somebody calls you a whore, run. Get out of it. It is not going to end well. And I know I've known people, my ex-fiancée, she was in a relationship like that for, only 30 plus years. And it takes a toll. Being accused of being unfaithful all the time by your partner, when you know that you're not, and you're trying to help that partner be happy, it's not in your power. Run the other way. All that partner is saying is confessing that they have a problem. And Desdemona says, by heaven, you do me wrong. And he says again, are you not a strumpet? Well, aren't you a whore? And she says, no. And I swear this as I am a Christian. If to preserve this vessel for my Lord, and she's talking about her private parts, her whole being. To preserve this vessel for my Lord from any other foul, unlawful touch, be not to be a strumpet. I am none. I am not a whore, she says. If a whore means that you give yourself away, that is the last thing that I am, she says. And Othello's like, what? Not a whore? And she says, no, as I shall be saved. She has a clean conscience, a clear conscience. And he says, is it possible? And then Desdemona looks up, and they're in the globe where you can see the sky, and she looks up to the heavens and says, oh heaven, forgive us. She's not arguing with him. She's just denying that she's unfaithful. And she's asking for forgiveness, even though she needs none. But when she says, forgive us, she understands that her husband needs forgiveness. And Othello says, I cry mercy then. I took you for that cunning whore of Venice that married with Othello. Okay. Now, this is a pun that Shakespeare is using. That cunning whore. Of Venice that married with Othello. Now this right here is the root word of the C word. Alright? I took you for that sea whore, is what he's saying right there. Cunning can also mean smart, but there's the implication here in Shakespeare's words that he's not just calling her whore, he is labeling her body parts. And then he calls off stage, you mistress that have the office opposite to St. Peter and keep the gate of hell. And so he's saying that Amelia, who is the lady in waiting, who's been standing guard, is the opposite of St. Peter because St. Peter stands over the gates of heaven, and Desdemona must be a hellish fiend. And so she is the opposite of Peter. She guards the gates of hell. And then Othello says to Amelia, you. We have done our course. There's money for your pains. So he pays her off. I pray you turn the key and keep our counsel. Meaning, be silent. Don't tell anybody what you've overheard right now. And isn't that what abusers want? Is for everybody to It's not as bad as it really is. It's not. Things can get better. And no, Shakespeare understands this about human nature. Things are only going to get worse when you are full of jealousy and rage and calling your loved one names like these. And then Othello leaves. And Emilia says to Desdemona, "What does this gentleman think, conceive? How do you, madam? How do you, good lady?" And Desdemona says, "Faith, half asleep." She is so bewildered by this whole exchange that she is perplexed. She is stunned, as the book describes it. "Good madam, what's the matter with my lord?" "With who?" "Why, with my lord, madam." And then Desdemona asks her, "Who is thy lord?" Who is thy lord? Now, this has many meanings. Lord, at this time in England, meant your husband or somebody who was higher than you. For women, everybody was their lord. Everybody. It also could be written, "Who is thy Lord?" Who is your God? For Emilia, she teeters. She's trying to please her husband. He has become her God. She takes all the abuse from Iago. She'll let him dismiss her even after she's robbed or stolen or happened to pick up the handkerchief. She'll put everything aside because she wants to please the person who rules her. Now, Lord, this is important for you to know. Oftentimes people measure time as BC. And they say that means before Christ. And they measure it in AD. And they say that means after death. That's not what AD means. Because if you had a calendar that went before Jesus, and then Jesus was born and lived 31, 32, or 33 years, as is tradition, and then you start the calendar again, you'd have a 33-year absence. AD stands for the Latin Annum Domini, the year of the Dominator, the year of the Lord. So Lord means dominator, okay? That's why when you see me writing dates or talking about dates, I use, instead of BC and AD, because before Christ and Annum Domini, the year of the Dominator, the year of the Lord, that assumes that everybody is Christian in this world. And about 4 out of 5 people surveyed are not. So the term that I like to use is CE, which is Common Era. The Common Era is what CE stands for. And it's not because I'm trying to get in people's faces who believe in Jesus, but I recognize that Christians are a minority in this world. They're a majority in our own country, but our country is small. I think we make up 4% of the world population. And Emilia reassures Desdemona, "My lord, he that is yours, sweet lady." And Desdemona says, "I have none." "Do not talk to me, Emilia. I cannot weep nor answer. Have I none but what should go by water? Prithee tonight, lay on my bed my wedding sheets. Remember, and call my husband hither." So, go and remake my bed. Put on the sheets that we had on our wedding night. Now, one might think, oh, isn't that special? Isn't that romantic? we're going to go back to the first time that we made love, assuming that that's the case, right? But the wedding sheets throughout the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, quiet, puppies, quiet. People would hang them out, their dirty laundry, or even while the reception was going on to show that the woman spilled blood because she was a virgin. So go put those sheets on my bed with the stain in them and everything. Blood's hard to get out. So that my Lord, her husband, can remember how chaste she was. That she was a virgin before they got married, and she's only been with him. People would applaud, by the way. Isn't that, I just think that's making the personal very too public. Because that assumes, of course, that your hymen, a woman's hymen hadn't broken doing athletics or because of an accident. And during the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, there were people whose job it was is to help women who knew they weren't virgins pretend like they were. And they would give them, for example, some pig blood to spill on the sheets so that everybody could pretend that the whole world everything was fine, even though you had kings taking the right of first night, meaning that if you wanted to get married and you were a peasant, that meant the king got to sleep with the bride first. We're talking about some very messed up, quiet puppies, very messed up traditions here. And Amelia says, here's a change indeed. And Desdemona says, 'tis meat I should be used to, very meat. How have I been behaved that he must stick the smallest opinion on my least misuse? What have I done to incur his wrath, is what she's saying. And now Iago comes along. And Iago says, what's your pleasure, madam? How is it with you? Do you think he really cares? He is happy that she's suffering right now because Othello is so enraged and so jealous. And Desdemona says, I cannot tell. Those that do teach young babes do with gentle means and easy tasks. He might have chid me so, for in good faith I am a child chiding. Meaning, people who teach young babies or kindergartners, they do it gently. And she's saying, I would take that kind of teaching better than being called a whore. And Iago says, well, what's the matter? As though he doesn't know. And Amelia says to her husband, alas, Iago, my lord has so abhorred her, thrown such despite, and heavy terms upon her as true hearts cannot bear. Abhorred her. He has called her a whore and made her into one by his language. And Desdemona looks up at Iago and says, am I that name, Iago? Am I a whore? And Iago acts like he doesn't understand her implication and says, what name, fair lady, beautiful lady? Such as she said my lord did say I was. And then Amelia fills Iago in. He called her whore. A beggar in his drink could not have laid such terms upon his own whore, his own callet. So even a drunk would not have been more clear about the whore he slept with than what Othello, the general, the rich person, the powerful person, the famous person, has called his faithful and virtuous wife. And Iago's like, why would he say that? Why did he say so? And Desdemona says, I don't know. I am sure I am none such. I am not. And Iago says, don't weep, because she starts to cry. Do not weep, do not weep. Alas the day. And Amelia says, has she forsook so many noble matches, her father and her country and her friends, to be called whore? Would it not make one weep? Because suitors came from everywhere to try to woo Desdemona. And she chose one person. She had the opportunity to play the field, but she chose one. And Emilia's saying, if you had had the opportunity to choose from anybody, and then that person you chose called you a whore, wouldn't you cry? And Desdemona says, it's my wretched fortune. Fortune is what the Romans called it, and fate is what the Greeks called it. It's just how my life is. And Iago does this fake thing saying, beshrew him for it. How comes this trick upon him? So, damn him. Why would he think anything like that? Even though he's like, he's happy. And Desdemona, who does not understand what Iago's been doing, says, nay, heaven doth know. Only heaven knows. Emilia says, I will be hanged if some eternal villain, some busy and insinuating rogue, some cozening slave to get some office have not devised this slander. I'll be hanged else. You can kill me if I'm not wrong that there is an eternal villain, a rogue, some sort of slave who hasn't spread these rumors. I'll bet my life on it. Who is she calling those things without knowing it? Her own husband. And Iago says, fie, there's no such man. It is impossible. Who would ever do that? There's no way. Even though he knows that it's him. And then Desdemona, showing the virtues that she exhibits, instead of wanting vengeance, says, if any such man there be, heaven pardon him. She wants that person to be forgiven for the sinful behavior. And Emilia says, a halter pardon him, meaning what you put in a horse's mouth, a halter. And hail gnaw his bones. And then Emilia says, why should he call her whore? Who keeps her company? Who is she alone with? What place, what time, what form, what likelihood, what chance? The Moor is abused by some most villainous knave, some base, notorious knave, some scurvy fellow. And these are names that fit her husband, right? Let's go back on them. Villainous, notorious, and scurvy. O heaven, that such companions thou didst unfold, and put in every honest hand a whip to lash the rascals naked through the world, even from the east and to the west. I wish to God that God provided a whip to whip a person like that from the east and to the west all day long. While the sun is rising in the east until the sun is setting, I would like God to provide a whip to punish somebody who is as foul as calling Desdemona unvirtuous. And then Iago says, speak within door to his wife. And, calm down, honey. Calm down. It's not as bad as you're saying. Just calm down. Speak like with your inside voice. And Emilia says, oh, fie upon them. Some such squire he was that turned your wit to see me side without and made you suspect me with the Moor. And Emilia comes clean right here and says, look, Iago, whoever has done this is the same type of person who made you think that I was sleeping with Othello. And I never have either. And Iago's nice husbandly response to his wife is, you are a fool. Go. And Desdemona says, alas, Iago, what shall I do to win my lord again, to make him trust me again? Good friend, go to him. For by the light of heaven I know not how I lost him. Here I kneel. She is down on her hands and knees, begging for Iago's help. when this is all in his plan. If ever my will did trespass against his love, either in discourse, speech, of thought, or actual deed, or that mine eyes, mine ears, or any sense delighted in any form, or that I do not yet and ever did, and ever will, though he do shake me off to beggarly divorcement, I love him dearly. Comfort, forswear me. Unkindness may do much, and his unkindness may defeat my life, but never taint my love. I can not even say whore. It does abhor me. See, hear that play on words? I cannot say whore. It does abhor me to even speak the word. Abhor means make me feel hateful or disowned. She doesn't walk around throwing around hoe, right? Because you all know that this idea of hoe that's become so popular in the past 2 decades, well, it's just another hoe, whatever. This is the word whore in it. For me, a hoe is something I use when I make my gardens, all right? And Desdemona can't even speak it without feeling terrible. Iago says, I pray you be content. Tis his humor, meaning it's just he's in a mood. It's the business of the state that's making him like this. And Desdemona is like, well, maybe that's so. 'Tis so, I promise, I warrant. Don't ever take a promise from somebody like Iago, because the man has no honesty. Maybe you've noticed in your life that oftentimes the people who make the most promises are the ones that are least likely to fulfill the promise. Why? Because they have no intent on fulfilling the promise. There are trumpets, and Desdemona and Emilia go off the stage, and then Rodrigo comes in, and he's upset with Iago because he's like, I gave you all these jewels, all these diamonds, and you haven't given me anything. And what does Rodrigo think that Iago is going to give him? The one that is being referred to as whore throughout the previous part of the scene. He thinks that he can buy his way. And if you have to pay for somebody to love you or pretend they love you, that is the very definition of prostitution, is it not? So my question is to you, in this play, who are the real whores? Because Desdemona is not a whore, that's for sure. Who are the real whores? And my belief is that a person who thinks that money can buy you sex is a whore in itself. So let's move on. Iago, if you go over to line 201, because he said, I haven't gotten anything for my cash. And Iago says in 201, I grant indeed it has not appeared, and your suspicion is not without wit and judgment. But Rodrigo, if thou hast that in thee indeed, which I have greater reason to believe now than ever, I mean purpose, courage, valor, do you see him complimenting him? This night show it. Show that you're a man. If thou the next night following enjoy not. Desdemona. And enjoy is a fancy way for saying the F word. And if you don't have that, take me from this world with treachery and devise engines for my life. Look, if you don't get what you wanted, you can kill me. Well, what is it? Is it within reason and compass? Can it happen? Sir, there is a special commission come from Venice to depute Cassio in Othello's place. Is it true? Why then, Othello and Desdemona return to Venice. Oh no, he goes into Mauritania and takes away with him the fair Desdemona, unless his abode be lingered here by some accident, wherein none can be so determinate as the removing of Cassio. You know, if you could kill Cassio, who Rodrigo believes is sleeping with Desdemona, you might still be able to sleep with her too. What would you have me do? If you dare do yourself a profit, the money, right, and a right, he sups with a harlotry, and thither will I go to him. So Cassio right now is having dinner with a madam, a prostitute, okay? And so go there. And Cassio knows not yet of his honorable fortune. If you watch him going thence, which I will fast you to follow it between 12 and 1, take him at your pleasure. Can you imagine murdering somebody, taking at your pleasure? I will show you such a necessity in his death, that you shall think yourself bound to put it on him. It's now high supper time, the night grows apace. Get about it. So once again, Iago is becoming the director of other people's actions. And Rodrigo's like, I will hear further reason for this. You have to explain some more, but I'm going to go do what you said. And Iago calls after him, and you shall be satisfied. Okay, so now we're in scene 3. And Othello enters, and Desdemona is there, and Ludovico, who is a nobleman, who is one of the people who employs Othello, is there. And this is what he says to his wife when Desdemona comes in. Oh, Desdemona. And this is line 5. My lord, get you to bed on the instant. I will be returned forthwith. Dismiss your attendant. Look to it to be done. Can you imagine your spouse telling you, you need to go to bed because us big people are going to be staying up tonight? He's treating her like she's a thing instead of somebody who can speak for herself, as he did in the first act. I will, my lord. And Othello exits with the nobleman Ludovico. And Emilia says, how goes it? He looks gentler than he did. It seems like he's in a better mood. And Desdemona says, he says he will return incontinent soon. He has commanded me to go to bed and bade me to dismiss you. Dismiss me? It was his bidding, therefore, good Emilia, give me my nightly wearing, so my nightgown, and adieu, goodbye. We must not displease him. And then Emilia says that she hates Othello. I would you had never seen him. Remember, this is an echo of Othello saying, I wish you had never been born. And Desdemona still sticks up for him. So would not I. My love does so approve that even his stubbornness, his checks, his frowns, they prey upon me, have grace and favor in them. And Emilia lets her know, I have laid those sheets you bade me on the bed. All's one, good faith, how foolish are our minds. If I do die before thee, pray thee shroud me in one of the same sheets. So here we have a bit of foreshadowing, and Desdemona saying, Emilia, if I die before you die, I want you to wrap me in my wedding sheets as a shroud to cover my dead body. Oh, come, you talk. And Desdemona starts to talk about a song that she was taught about when she was a child, and how the person who sang it died singing it. So we keep having this foreshadowing. And Emilia asks, should I go get your nightgown? No, just unpin my clothes. We're talking in this time, in this age, that it was impossible for somebody of high standing, a woman of high standing, to get dressed by herself because of the corsets and bustles and everything else. No, just come untie me, untie my corset. And the corset was designed to make a woman appear more skinny in the waist, have bigger hips, and push the breasts up. What it is it's a fancy bustier that actually suffocated women and gave them pneumonia, and they died from trying to be in fashion. And it was impossible to put one on by yourself. You had to have help. So then Desdemona is going to start singing, because we've heard a lot of intrigue, and so we as an audience need a little bit of a break. But this song is going to give us a musical interlude, but also make us more and more concerned for Desdemona's life. And she sings in line 39 about, the poor soul sat sighing by a sycamore tree. Sing all, green willow, her hand on her bosom, her head on her knee. So obviously someone who's grieving. Sing, willow, willow, willow. And she's talking about weeping willows. If you don't know what a weeping willow is, just Google it on the net and check it out. These are beautiful trees, but they look like they are grieving. The fresh streams ran by her and murmured her moans. Sing, willow, willow, willow. Her salt tears fell from her and softened the stones. Lay by these. Sing, willow, willow, willow. Prithee, hide thee. He'll come soon. Sing, all, green willow must be my garland. Let nobody blame him. His scorn I approve. So this is a song about a woman who's deeply in love and whose boyfriend does not show up, and who is grieving that, but saying, don't blame him, it must be my fault. And she continues to sing in line 53, I call my love false love, but what said he then? Sing, willow, willow, willow. If I court more women, you will couch more men. So her lover told her to grieve, sing willow. And if I sleep around, then you'll sleep around too. Isn't that what true love's all about? Someone who's saying, you know, I'm profligate, and I expect that you will be too. So get thee gone, good night, mine eyes do itch. Does that bode weeping? And Amelia says, because that's what Desdemona says to Amelia, 'tis neither here nor there. And Desdemona says, I have heard it said so. Oh, these men, dost thou in conscience think, tell me, Amelia, that there be women do abuse their husband in such gross kind? Tell me, Amelia, truthfully, are there women who treat their husbands like my husband has treated me today? Would that make it any better, really? To think, oh, well, that's just what people do when they're in a relationship. It could be a way of staying in an abusive relationship, right? Well, you know, everybody's like that once in a while. They just fly off the handle, and I should have not provoked him. Because what is it that abusers love to tell the people they're abusing? You made me do this. Even when it's the farthest thing from the truth. And then we have Amelia here saying, well, you know what? If I could get away with sleeping around, I'd do it in the dark. She's a lot like her husband. A lot like her husband. And Desdemona asks her, would thou do such a deed for the whole world? Would you need to be promised the whole world? And Amelia says, the world's a huge thing. It's a great price for a small vice. In truth, I think you would not. In truth, I think I should do it and undo it when I had done it. Marry, I would not such a thing for a joint ring, nor for measures of lawn, nor for gowns, petticoats, nor caps, nor petty exhibition, but for all the whole world, who would not make her husband a cuckold to make him a monarch? I would go to hell. I'd go to purgatory for it. I would sleep around. So Amelia looks at her own body as just a part of an exchange. That's not Desdemona, how Desdemona sees her own body. She sees her body as loving her husband, not as a way of getting what her husband might want. And Desdemona says, beshrew me if I would do such a wrong for the entire world. Curse me if I ever did that, even if I was promised the world. And Amelia says, why, the wrong is but a wrong in the world, and having the world for your labor, 'tis a wrong in your own world, and you might quickly make it right. So if you were ruling the world once you've done the wrong, you could say it wasn't a wrong. This goes back to the idea at the same time this play was written, previous to this play being written, but very shortly before, Machiavelli in Italy wrote a book called The Prince. And in it, and in The Prince, Machiavelli wrote it to get in favor of royalty. And he makes a statement. Hey, Shai?
Yeah.
Would you look up Machiavelli to make sure I spelled it right here? So in this brief book to tell royalty how to rule, Machiavelli coins the phrase, might makes right. So if you have power, whatever you say is right. You don't have to have any morals. You don't have to have any ethics. How is Machiavelli spelled?
Machiavelli.
Woohoo! So I wrote it right. Thank you, buddy. My son's fact-checking me right now. But this phrase comes straight from this book, The Prince, written in Italian. I've only read it in the translation, okay? But might makes right. If you're the King Poobah, whatever you say goes. You can make your own rules. You can make your own sins or not. You can always say that you are sinless, that you have no responsibility. And Desdemona says, I do not think there is any such woman. I don't believe there's any woman that would ever do that, to make her husband a king or to rule. And Amelia says, yes, a dozen, and many to the advantage as would store the world they played for. And then Amelia goes on to say, there are many women who would do that, but I think it is their husbands' faults if wives do fall. For example, say they slack their duties and pour out treasures in foreign laps. When she talks about duties and foreign laps, she's talking about, well, let's just say men aren't sleeping with their wives. Instead, they're in foreign laps. They're sleeping with other women's laps. Okay? Or else break out into peevish jealousies, throwing restraint upon us. Or say they strike us. Let's just say they hit us. Or scant our former having in despite why we have galls, and though we have some grace, yet we have some revenge. Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. Let husbands know their wives are as smart as them. They see, they smell, and they have their palates for both sweet and sour as husbands have. What is it that they do when they change us for others? So you've heard of the trophy wife, you know, like you get on the 7th year of marriage or 7th year of the relationship, and you have to trade up, just like with a car, right? This one's getting old, and she says, when they change us for others, is it sport? So is it a competition? So sport can mean competition, and it also reeks in this time period as the word sex. Is it sex? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it does. Is it frailty that thus errs? It's so too. And have not we affections and desires for sport? As women, don't we also want to make love? And we have frailty as men have? Then let them use us well. Else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us so. So, we're just like men. Let them use us, and also let them know that we will come back for our revenge. And that is the end of Act 4. Please go back and read it and see what you think about it. I didn't read all of it, but these are the things in play. Shakespeare understands human thought, human relationships, what makes people tick. He understands domestic violence. This play certainly is not endorsing domestic violence. It is condemning it wholeheartedly. And it's certainly not endorsing the idea of calling women whores. Thank you.